The Eurovision Song Contest was first held on the 24th of May 1956 at the Teatro Cursal in Lugano, Switzerland. But each country that year submitted 2 entries, the only time this has happened in the history of the competition. Also, judging and scoring, done by a panel of judges from each participating nation, but prevented from voting for their own nation's entry, was held behind closed doors, with the winner simply announced.
Eurovision 1956 was actually the only year that the judges voted for their own country. And this caused some controversy because the Luxembourgian judges weren't able to make it, so 2 more Swiss judges voted on their behalf, which may have very well contributed to Switzerland being the winner.
The song had to be 3 minutes or less in length and had to be performed live.
The 3-minute rule wasn't added until 1958, but his transition from talking about Eurovision 1956 to talking about the contest as a whole is a bit confusing.
The winner that year was France's submission, Dormo l'amour. The third place entry, however, Italy's Nel blu di Ponto di Blu, sung by Domenico Modugno, has arguably become the bigger song, winning 2 Grammy Awards in 1959, and it remains one of the most iconic and commercially successful European songs of the decade.
I know this is just poor phrasing, but there is zero debate over whether Dor mon amour or Volare is the bigger song. The real debate lies in whether Volare is the biggest Eurovision song of all time.
1997 saw a step to help this time issue when pre-recorded backing music was first allowed, thus simplifying the set change process.
Eurovision entries have been allowed to use backing tracks, at least partially, since the 1970s. The conditions for doing so were a bit unclear for a while, and there was a lot of back and forth. This article by Bas Tukker offers a very interesting insight into Eurovision's complicated history with backing tracks. Definitely give it a read. 1997 was simply the year Eurovision officially allowed countries to use backing tracks with 0 conditions.
In the 1960s, countries like Spain and Portugal, led by right-wing authoritarian dictatorships, used their entries to soften the international view of their countries in the eyes of the other more democratically led nations participating. This same tactic was used by Greece and Turkey in the 1970s, and then again by regimes in Russia and Azerbaijan in the 2000s.
The inclusion of Greece and Turkey in this segment is weird. Greece's dictatorship ended a few months after they debuted in the contest, and Turkey's military rule wasn't until the early 80s. And as he points out later in the video, Turkey's results in their early years were pretty horrendous, so it definitely didn't do much for their image in the eyes of the rest of Europe.
Much of that criticism has been aimed at songs and performances since the 1970s, as songs aimed at the more traditional, transgenerational audiences of the 1950s and 60s changed to be more contemporary in style, aimed at a younger audience. ABBA's performance of Waterloo stands out as a watershed moment, not only being sung in English, but offering a catchy, upbeat pop song.
I wouldn't call ABBA the watershed moment for bringing pop to Eurovision Song Contest. I would give that to Franz Gall, who won for Luxembourg in 1965, and I say this as someone who doesn't even like her entry. The song was monumental in bringing Eurovision from intergenerational music, as David calls it, to contemporary pop. By the time ABBA came along, it was already a staple of the contest.
What some would call a perfect Eurovision song, or Europop.
One thing about Waterloo is that it's very much a Eurovision legend. You will constantly see public polls and YouTube list factories calling it the best Eurovision song of all time, but you'd rarely see people call it the best ABBA song. This one Guardian article ranked Waterloo as number 22 out of ABBA's 27 singles, but still calls it the best ever Eurovision winner. It's like people enjoy ABBA's Eurovision story a lot more than they enjoy the song itself.
Dean Vuletic describes it like this. They were the odes to joy of the post-war era. As the standard genre playing in discos, shopping centers, and summer resorts, Europop was the mirror and product of a period of prosperity and stability.
God, where do I start with Europop? I'm reminded of verilybitchie's video, The Queer Politics of Eurovision, which, by the way, is a fantastic video if you're interested in learning about Eurovision's political history. But at the very end, she credits Eurovision with the creation of the genre Europop, which I don't really agree with. The creation and evolution of Europop as a genre mostly happened outside of Eurovision. There were some entries in the 70s and 80s that would fall under the label. You got the classics like ABBA and Bobby Socks and Genghis Khan, a few miscellaneous Nordic entries, and that's about it. I said this before in my 1996 video, but Eurovision in the 70s and 80s was almost a caricature of mainstream pop music. and also a lot of ballads. Eurovision infamously skipped out on the Eurodance craze of the mid-90s, with a couple notable exceptions, and they only really embraced Europop as a genre at the turn of the millennium.
Possibly the most familiar example for many viewers of LGBTQ+ performances at Eurovision would be the 2014 winner of the contest, Conchita Wurst from Austria. Wurst's win in 2014 was controversial, but only after he won.
Conchita Wurst's win only became controversial after the win? What? I assume he misspoke and meant to say that Conchita Wurst's participation in Eurovision only became controversial after she won the contest, but that is extremely wrong. As soon as Wurst was announced as Austria's participant in September of 2013, Facebook groups in her home country popped up which were dedicated to bullying her and urging the Austrian broadcaster to change their mind. And there were petitions in Belarus, Ukraine, and Russia that called for Conchita to be pulled from the competition. For a video that's meant to be about the politics of Eurovision and European identity, it's very telling that it only makes passing mentions of Israel and Ukraine. Like it or not, Eurovision 2022 was essentially a vehicle for drumming up support for Ukraine in its war against Russia. Countless artists and spokespeople were permitted to call for peace in Ukraine, which blatantly violated Eurovision's rules against political statements, yet 2 years later, they were policing artists for having tattoos and fingernails that supported Palestine. The only attempted explanation I can find for this double standard is this Yahoo News article that claims that explicit support for Ukraine at Eurovision was fine because Ukraine is not contested territory. First of all, that's fucking bullshit at face value. You can find many articles from mainstream sources referring to eastern Ukraine as contested. And speaking of contested territory, the EB was totally fine with countries filming postcards in the Golan Heights in 2019, which is internationally recognized as a region of Syria that was illegally annexed by Israel. The citation for this contested territory claim is a Poo Poo Blogs article from 2016, which only says that Eurovision doesn't allow flags of disputed territories. The rulebooks from 2019 and 2022 say nothing about contested territory either, and both make it extremely clear that political statements are banned from Eurovision. And if you want to know more about all the bullshit Israel has caused at Eurovision, I would highly recommend watching verilybitchie's videos on the topic. And a couple of my own videos too. Yes, to toot my own horn.
As a Canadian, I am going to sit down this week and watch Eurovision 2025, coming from Basel, Switzerland.
To anyone who feels guilty about still watching Eurovision 2025 despite all the calls to boycott, just remember that there are people who thought 2025 was a good year to start.